Well, in India, if you follow a rule, you feel like you missed a deal, na? If you follow a rule saying, "Arey, किसी को phone करना था, भाई, किसी को पैसे देना था," rule कौन follow करता है? That is very inefficient on a national basis. If everybody in India is thinking about how to get a deal, then you're not thinking about how to kick China's butt.
The main key to produce more jobs is entrepreneurship.
Well, without employers, there are no employees. That's pretty obvious to anybody. We only have 30,000 companies in India with a paid-up capital of more than 10 crores. Is this a joke or what?
How can this be flipped?
Deregulate India. Give us Purna Swaraj from the bureaucrats. Same electrician from Balasore in Orissa goes to Lucknow, gets 2 times more salary, goes from Lucknow to Bangalore, gets 4 times more salary, goes to Dubai, gets 8 times more salary, and goes to Switzerland, gets 25 times more salary. And this is without skill development and removing body odor and cutting his nails and telling him to shave and tucking his shirt in. Okay, all set?
Yeah, all set. This set.
Rolling, all 3 rolling. Keep okay. And on Prasanna, 3, 2, and...
Manish Sabharwal co-founded TeamLease in 2002 and has spent more than 2 decades building India's employment story. Today, we have Manish to discuss with us India's employment story, what's working in the job sector for India, what's not working, and urgent reforms India needs to create millions of jobs for 9 million graduates it produces every year. Manish, hello and welcome to the Rediff podcast.
Thank you.
More recently, you are also the author of Made in India, the story of Desh Bandhu Gupta, Lupin, and Indian Pharma. What's the story behind the book?
This is the story of 3 journeys or 3 people and companies industries that shouldn't exist, right? I was born and brought up in Kashmir, and there's a Sufi concept called Lohe-Azal, which is the tablet of destiny or the book of fate, right? Where everything that happens to everybody is written. But if anybody was looking at 3 journeys of the book Made in India, one is Indian Pharma, one is Lupin, and one is Desh Bandhu Gupta, or let's call him DBG going forward.
That's what is popular.
It should not exist, right? No economist in the world would predict that a country with $2,500 per capita income would be making 50% of the world's medicines. Right, Lupin has been around for 70 years, and the world would not have eradicated or brought TB almost close to zero if it wasn't for Lupin. They're the world's largest maker of TB drugs. They also sell 20 billion pills a year in the US, right? And DBG grew up in a house without electricity, without water. His father was a government school teacher. And he had 5 jobs before he started Lupin. But he wouldn't have started Lupin if he hadn't been fired from his job as a chemistry professor from BITS Pilani, right? So he took the Indian Air Force exam and came back to Pilani, and they said, "You're not allowed to take an exam without our permission." He said, "Well, I don't need anybody's permission to serve the nation." They said, "Look at your contract, you do. And you should resign."
That's what I think is more shocking. I mean, BITS Pilani fired Desh Bandhu Gupta because he applied for his job in...
Yeah, so he said that I'm not going to quit. If you want, you fire me. But, we should endow a chair at BITS Pilani for firing him because, he would not have been an entrepreneur unless he had been fired, because his father was a teacher, his grandfather a teacher, his great-grandfather was a teacher, his aunt was a teacher, his uncle was a teacher. So role models around you really matter, right? The stories he heard were education. Now Lupin's market cap is more than 1,20,000 crores. It's among the top 10 drug companies in India, and among the top 10 generic companies in the world. And people like entrepreneurs like me, who are first generation entrepreneurs, grew up after the license Raj ended. Right? But the license Raj murdered entrepreneurship. And so Indian Pharma, whether it was Desh Bandhu Gupta, Hamid of Cipla, Dilip Sanghvi of Sun Pharma, all set up their companies in a very hostile environment for entrepreneurship. The license Raj is basically, show me the person, I'll show you the role. It had a lot of corruption, because corruption is the transmission losses between how the law is written, interpreted, practiced, and enforced. So I think that the story was inspiring to me, obviously, because I got to spend 16 years for him. I'm married to his daughter. But it also was just an unlikely industry. See, software and pharma should not exist in India. India exported more software than Saudi Arabia did oil a few years ago. And Americans ate 400 billion pills last year. 200 billion of them were made in India. this is particularly an important story for me as somebody who works in labor markets when people say that India should give up on manufacturing jobs, right? That China has become the factory to the world. India's services, customer service, sales, logistics will somehow help our farm to non-farm transition. But if anything can be or needs to be at the highest quality, it is drugs which you put in your mouth. And if 60% of the world's drugs can be made in India, surely we can make cars and planes and everything else that we are currently not doing and on the scale. So I think for me, this is a story of three journeys which defy destiny. It's a story of an entrepreneur who defied the odds, but didn't have a linear journey. He had lots of trouble in his life, and failures are a part of success. So that was important. And it's just now that pharma is very different from software, right? Software exports 90% of its production. Pharma only exports 50% of its production. So half of Indian pharma sales come from India and half come from the rest of the world. So I think in so many ways it was just an interesting story to be told. And, business biographies tend to be a little bit less readable. I read a lot. I like reading. And so I thought that why should I criticize? Let me see whether I can do something a little different. Now time will tell whether I did.
Was it difficult for you to talk about the failures that DBG encountered in his life?
I think the story
normal biographies are written in glowing terms.
Yeah, but I think, entrepreneurship is like science. It's hypothesis testing. You can't prove anything right. You have to prove it wrong, right? Most people think of entrepreneurs as jumping out of a bathtub with an idea and saying eureka. That's not how creativity works. And also, that's not how companies work. So DBG obviously had a lifelong limp. He had tinnitus. But he had a 10-year lost decade. And for most people, their IPO is the beginning of, or the pinnacle of their success. But his IPO in 1993 led to a decade of real chaos and almost bankruptcy for Lupin, right? Yeah. Because they had extra money, he diversified into real estate, they had a liquidity crisis, they took on debt, the typical challenge. But so from 10 years from 1993 to 2003 was a really difficult period for Lupin. And it had not only a professional toll or a market cap toll, which it did, it also had a personal toll on him. He went into a little depression, he went into that. And I'm not sure he fully recovered from all that, but he put that failure behind him, and 2003 to 2017 when he passed away, it was the peak Lupin market cap ever. And he did the transition to his kids, he hired a professional MD, he rebuilt the company, he really built research and development. So I think that failure, in some step, every stage he took, right? So his time at BITS Pilani gave him the chemistry skills he needed. Pharmaceutical was all chemistry, right? Even Cipla was founded by a chemistry professor. In fact, India's first pharmaceutical company, Bengal Chemicals, in 1890 was founded by a chemistry professor. So being fired for BITS was bad, but it gave him the chemistry skills. Working for Khandelwal Pharma, an Indian pharma company, gave him a strong appreciation of sales and the market, but also that Indian companies weren't meritocracies and were not investing in brand technology. He worked for a multinational called Main Baker, which is Sanofi now. He loved the structure and the processes, but he also hated the bureaucracy. He said anybody can say no and nobody can say yes. So if you think of Lupin, he sort of synthesized his failures and experiences and used each one as base camp for the next assault. So while he had very deep lows, each low was higher than the last, and he just kept having higher highs. So, we don't really move like that, and that's why sometimes I think of his journey as sort of Ludo is a better game than Snakes and Ladders, and I spend some time on that because Snakes and Ladders is more attractive, but that big snake at 98 brings you to 12, right? While Ludo is boring, but you know where you're going, you'll eventually get there, it may be slow. And I think the compounding of DBG from his birth to starting Lupin in 1967 to his partner is not a story of Snakes and Ladders, which is, magic and stuff like that. It's just quiet compounding.
Your book, Made in India, also extensively talks about poor infrastructure, weak, terrible regulations, and weak capital markets, and the odds. Despite all the odds, the entrepreneurs like DBG overcame and became successful. Taking from there, what does that journey say about India's capability to build industries and jobs at scale? And how many people does the pharma industry in India employ today?
See, why also this book is important is there were not that many people who were successful in the license Raj who have survived after the license Raj ended, right? See, there was this stupid 1955 Avadi resolution which was codified in the 1956 second five-year plan, which murdered entrepreneurship. It nationalized banks, it
Isn't it
reserved
too
for the
extreme,
special-
too harsh to say murdered entrepreneurship?
I think it did. In under the license Raj, you didn't have clients, you had hostages, right? I think you should have clients, right? So why have most of the companies who thrived in the license Raj, except for 2, 3, 5, maybe I can count it on my fingertips, not survived or done well after the license Raj went away? Because the key skill in the license Raj was regulatory arbitrage. It was managing Delhi. It wasn't coming up with better products or reducing your cost or innovating or delighting your customers. So my sense is that I think that and I am even disappointed in 1991 because India and China had the same per capita GDP in 1991. Now they are 5 times more than us. So we can't do puja of 1991. It was a big disruption from the past, but it was not sufficient to create mass prosperity. See, we have created mass democracy. India has created the world's largest democracy on the infertile soil of the world's most hierarchical society, right? 3 million people win an election, 22 million people stand for an election. But why didn't we create mass prosperity? Why didn't we create the world's largest economy? And I think it was because we really, of our relationship with entrepreneurs. It was an adversarial relationship, like a tug of war, rather than a dance. And pharma is also, in my mind, important because it's a creation of policy. See, without the 1970 Patents Act in India and the 1984 Hatch-Waxman Act in the US, Indian pharma would not be making half of the world's medicines. So as somebody who has raved and ranted and screamed about regulatory cholesterol in India for 25 years, this book was also important for me to be humble and recognize that when policy making can be smart and dance with ambitious entrepreneurs, you can create magic. So my case is that it is like Amartya Sen talks about the missing millions of women because of female infanticide. I believe they're missing many million entrepreneurs and large companies from India that didn't happen under the license Raj and have still not fully happened because of the regulatory cholesterol where everything is prohibited till permitted rather than permitted till prohibited. So I think if we had not taken the license Raj mentality and continued some of it in the permission Raj since 1991, we would have 100 million more factory jobs in India. We would have 5 million more Provident Fund and ESI payers in India.
How many jobs have been created in the pharma industry in the last decade, and how many more do you think? Because pharma depends mainly on manufacturing. We manufacture drugs. So how do you think this goes for pharma?
I would say there are 2 million jobs directly from the pharma, and in this, obviously, there are 5 million people working in software. But pharma is a very high value add. So I think manufacturing has changed. So I think that we should not give up on being the factory to the world, but we have to recognize that India's manufacturing opportunity is much less labor intensive than it was for China in 1978. See, the peak of any country's labor force in manufacturing was Britain in World War II, 45%. China peaked at 38, America peaked at 28. India will never get to those numbers, but India only has 11% of our labor force in manufacturing. That is the wrong number. So I think we can get to 17, 18% or 19%, which will be another 75 to 100 million jobs. So I think pharma will never be 50 million jobs, but it is very high value add, it is very high paying. But India needs low skill jobs and low skill manufacturing jobs. I mean, Apple has shown us that they can go from 0 to 25% of global iPhone production within 5 years. And they only need 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks to get an iPhone manufacturer skilled, fresh 12th class or a graduate can become that. So I think that pharma should not be judged by its employment potential. It should be judged by its innovation, by its value add. Of course, they do create a lot of employment, and especially domestic markets are where the distribution systems are very complex and require huge numbers of people. But I think pharma should be looked at, India can play in knowledge businesses. B, India can make for the world. So made in India. There's too much export pessimism in India, right? That we will, not be able to compete with China. China has become the factory to the world. The switching costs in supply chains are too high. I don't think that is true. So I think the most embarrassing number about India is related to factory employment indirectly. So
what creates this inferiority complex when it comes to China, competing with China in manufacturing and creating jobs?
I think regulatory cholesterol is holding India back. I don't think there are cultural explanations for India's lack of mass prosperity. I mean, the Hindu rate of growth went from 2% to 7% without shooting all the Hindus. So clearly, or Confucianism was used to explain why China is poor. Now it's used to explain why China is rich. I mean, China went from foot binding women to 60% labor force participation in 40 years. So I don't think cultural explanations hold us back. I don't think infrastructure is much better, finance is much better, skills is much better. So I think the only explanation for India's lack of competitiveness with China is regulatory cholesterol now.
And would you think that if we administer some statins to this to get rid of this regulatory cholesterol, India will produce more jobs? And should the government be held responsible for this regulatory cholesterol?
I'm not sure our problem is jobs.
India is a country with teeming millions. I mean, where will the jobs come from if you have this regulatory cholesterol?
Yeah, no, I don't think India has a jobs problem. I think we have a wages problem. And I think that distinction is important and diagnosis is important, because if you think we have a jobs problem, you'll throw money from helicopters, you'll mandate a 3-day work week, you'll take away people's JCBs and shovels and give them spoons to dig with because they'll dig the hole and fill it up. If you believe India has a wages problem, the solutions are totally different. It is productivity, right? And so my thesis is there are no such thing as poor people, there are people in poor places. And there are 3 physical places and 3 conceptual places. The 3 physical places are which country you're born in, which state you're born in, and which city you live in, right? A same electrician from Balasore in Odisha goes to Lucknow, gets 2 times more salary, goes from Lucknow to Bangalore, gets 4 times more salary, goes to Dubai, gets 8 times more salary, and goes to Switzerland, gets 25 times more salary. And this is without skill development and removing body odor and cutting his nails and telling him to shave and tucking his shirt in. It's the same damn electrician picked up bringing 25 times more salary. So country premium we see, right? But states also. My parents live in UP, I live in Karnataka. Both states have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/5 the number of people. And if everybody in India lived in Bangalore, then India's GDP would be more than China, right? India's GDP is $2,500, China's GDP is $12,500, Bangalore's GDP is $12,500. Okay. So clearly, which city, which state, and which country you live in matters. But what we've not paid as much attention to, which sector you work in, which firm you work in, and which skill you work in also matters. Agriculture has 45% of our labor force, but it only produces 14% of our GDP. Now, software, we love software, but it's only 0.8% of India's labor force. But it produces 8% of GDP.
$250 billion of exports.
So 8% of GDP. So I think it's important to recognize which sector you work in, which firm you work in. We just did an exercise with the World Bank, and we ranked companies by size, and there's a 29 times difference in productivity between our biggest and our smallest manufacturing firms. Now, if there's 29 times difference in productivity, you'll never pay the wage premium. But if you never pay the wage premium, you'll never be productive. So you get stuck in this low-level equilibrium with a lot of dwarfs rather than babies. See, as an entrepreneur, there are 2 kinds of companies. You can create a baby and a dwarf. Both are small. Baby is going to grow. India has 63 million enterprises. 12 million don't have an office. 12 million work from home. Only 12 million pay GST. Only 1 million pay Provident Fund. Only 32,000 companies in India have a paid-up capital of more than 10 crores. So 6.3 crore enterprises means nothing if it only translates to 30,000 companies with a paid-up capital of more than 10 crores. So our firm structure matters. And finally, skill. We pay a 4 times difference in salary to a graduate of the same age, same qualification on paper, because soft skills matter more than hard skills. So I think we should move away from saying India has a jobs problem to saying we have a wages problem. And if you think it's a wages problem, you will focus on productivity. And the biggest assassinator of productivity in India is regulatory cholesterol. Because we don't have a problem of land, labor, capital. You could give every Indian household half an acre and they would fit into Rajasthan and Maharashtra. We don't have a problem of capital when we deserve it. 50% of our foreign direct investments in 1947 has come in the last 6 years. 90% of our private equity and venture capital has come in the last 10 years in 1947. So when we deserve capital, and we don't have a shortage of labor, 40% of our labor force is Vela and just hanging out, right? But how land, labor, capital combine?
Exactly, the confluence.
Well, that's called total factor productivity by economists, but human beings call it entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
We call it technology, you can call it innovation. So India is poor because of how we treat our entrepreneurs. And only the pharmaceutical industry was interesting to me because these entrepreneurs defied this license Raj. Software entrepreneurs defied the license Raj. But software is a post-90s phenomena. These guys are 60s, 70s, 80s, they were laying the foundation. So I think that if Indian policy changes its relationship with entrepreneurs, then we can beat China and we can deliver mass prosperity. I don't think mass prosperity will be delivered by the government spending. So fiscal policy and monetary policy have been oversold.
Yeah.
See, government spending has gone up 108 times since 1990. Per capita GDP has only gone up 8 times. See, the total, all central state governments, Tamil Nadu's welfareism, Punjab's goofiness, everything. In 1990, it only was 82,000 crores. This year is 1,20,000 crores will be spent by the government. And anyway, fiscal deficits could make countries rich. Why would a country bother being poor? And I have spent a few years on the RBI board. I'm not sure whether monetary policy is a placebo or a painkiller or a steroid. It's definitely not a medicine.
And you're still on the RBI board despite saying this.
That's okay. I mean, I think we should. The most dangerous lies are the lies we tell ourselves as institutions, as boards, as individuals. So I think it's important if India wants to compete with China, we need to recognize that our problem is structural reform.
Okay. While you say India has wages problem and not jobs problem, official figures say that unemployment is 5% and independent institutions like the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy puts it at 9%, the unemployment rate. Don't you think this is a serious problem in a country where we have teeming millions, most of India is employed in the agri sector? What's the major roadblock for job creation in India, and how do you
whether it's 5% unemployment or 7 or 9, it doesn't matter. That is the wrong metric for a developing country. Our problem is employed poverty. Employed poverty means you have a job, but you don't make enough money to live well or live in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, where the jobs are being created. Now, there are many things going on, but the fundamental problem is that the flow of jobs since 1991 has not changed the stock of jobs since 1975. It's the most embarrassing number about India that half our labor force closes still works on farms. You know, if you told me 25 years ago that China would move 300 million people from farm to non-farm employment, while India's stock market would deliver 1300% return, while China would only deliver minus 13% return. So in the last 25 years, China has not delivered stock market returns, it's minus 13%. India has delivered 1300%. But they have moved 300 million people from farm to non-farm employment, and we still have 45% of our labor force stuck in farm. It would be counterintuitive to a thinking person that a democracy would deliver shareholder returns, while an autocracy would deliver farm and wage transformation. So I think we have to step back a little bit and say that, you know, India is a very, we may not be the most powerful and most important country in the world, but we have strong claims to be the most interesting country in the world. But our economic model since 1947 has not delivered the transformation of 5 transitions. What is development? Development is farm to non-farm transition, urban to rural, informal to formal, subsistence self-employment to wage employment, and school to work. Now how much does policy have to do with this? I think a huge amount. But I also think it's also decentralization that has been the problem, right? 29 chief ministers matter more than one prime minister, as our current prime minister always says. But you know, Indira Gandhi in 20 of her speeches had said strong states lead to a weak nation. And N.T. Ramarao had responded the next day saying that the central government is a conceptual myth. Everything that matters to citizens' daily lives is done by state governments. I think both extremes are wrong. We need centripetal forces and centrifugal forces, right? So I think more decentralization of funds, functions, and functionings. If you study China closely, you will realize that the genius of China was 200 mayors competing for investment. India doesn't have, chief ministers have only recently started competing for investment, and chief ministers currently are unwilling to give power to mayors. So we don't have real mayors in India. We don't have real chief executives. So I think the physical geography of work, which is do you take jobs to people or people to jobs, needs to be transformed. I think I read a recent article by the Chief Minister of UP, Yogi, saying there are 37 flights to Bangalore every day. Instead of taking our children to Karnataka, we want to keep our children. That's the right way that labor surplus countries in the north should be thinking, that we want to become fertile habitats, which is a physical transformation. But we also need to translate our legislative geography of work, which is the regulatory cholesterol. We need to transform our sectoral geography of work, which is have more manufacturing jobs. We need to transform our education geography of work. Finally, human capital is the only renewable energy for any country. 265 lakh kids took the class 10th exam last year, 105 lakh failed. We took 260 lakh kids took the class 12th exam, 80 lakh failed. Of the 80 lakh who passed class 12, 50 lakh went to college. Now, this is not a good pipeline if we want to do drug development and we want to build AI models, right? So I think fixing government schools may be more important than fixing IITs or having other universities. I think higher education is very important. But again, the most embarrassing number about India is only 45% of kids are left in government schools. Only 5% of kids in Japan go to private school. Only 15% of kids in America go to private school. So if anything should be free and at quality, it should be government schools. So I think we have to step back as a country and take an inventory of what we are doing right, which is many things. Be honest about what we are doing wrong. And be willing to tackle that problem. Otherwise, we will not create the high-paying jobs. We will continue to create jobs, but they will be low-paying, self-employment, farm employment jobs, which don't meet the aspirations of the younger generation. Yeah. See, the older generation was willing for self-exploitation. Right, there's an idiot Russian economist called Chernov who convinced Nehru in the 1920s that small farms are viable because you don't have to pay your wife a salary, you don't have to pay your kids a salary, you don't have to pay yourself a salary, you don't have to pay rent, so self-exploitation. And he called it the theory of self-exploitation. I mean, what an idiot. I mean, how? But unfortunately, in India, farm employment and self-employment is largely self-exploitation. But I think the next generation is not willing for self-exploitation.
So what's the solution, Manish? Because let's talk numbers. If India produces 9 million graduates, how many jobs does India produce?
India can produce lots of jobs. Just get rid of the regulatory cholesterol. I mean, I think that entrepreneurship is not some gene which is surgically removed among Indians. It is the scaling of our entrepreneurs that has been held back by these 4 or 5 or 6 toxic regulatory sort of philosophies. One of them is prohibited till permitted. I've been asked 122 times in my life, I've kept a list, of who allowed you to do this. Now, that's a profound question from a theory of knowledge perspective. Everything, innovation by definition is permissionless, right? The notion of drunk driving is an argument against cars. You write the law for the chore, even though there's only 0.1% chores, but you harass the 90% for a law written for a chore, right? The notion of the administrative states, instruments, right? If you think that the constitution is clear, there should only be acts and rules. But our 19 other instruments, notification, guidelines, circular, office order, memorandum, which the administrative state has invented, basically make regulations, show me the person, I'll show you the rule. Stalin's head of secret police used to say, show me the person, I'll show you the crime. How is our administrative state, and this is not the 6,700 IAS officers in Delhi, it's the 25 million civil servants, the labor inspector, the ESI inspector, the building inspector, who really are not enforcing rules, they're just doing corruption.
At least we're creating jobs that way by having 25 million civil servants.
But that is again a rounding error. Yeah. So I believe that infrastructure, finance and skills have shifted from being a dagger in the heart to a thorn in the flesh. The only dagger in the heart for India is regulatory cholesterol.
Okay. And if this regulatory cholesterol were to be removed from the top, if the order comes from top that we have to get rid of this regulatory cholesterol, how many jobs do you think can India produce in the next decade?
Could put 100 million jobs. I would more
100
than
million
that.
jobs every year.
Yes, we could over the period of time.
Okay.
Countries are big ships; they take time to move. And we have a classic example when the PM decided that decriminalisation was a priority. We had done a report called "Jailed for Doing Business" 7 years ago, where we chronicled the 26,410 ways for an employer like me to go to jail. And, you had to put tuna in your factory, you had to have a canteen committee didn't meet you. There's so many ways, silly ways to go to jail. So when the PM decided that decriminalisation, last month a bill, Jan Vishwas bill and the labour codes removed 12,400 ways to go to jail. So I think when we decide to do flick of pen reforms, see there are three kinds of reform. Flick of pen reforms, capacity building reforms and institutional reforms. Capacity building reforms are very hard. Institutional reforms we can still do. But flick of pen reforms though we should do, right? So deregulation, decriminalisation, digitization and decentralisation should be we should pray to one God, which is employers. We should deregulate India, we should decriminalize India, we should digitize the government, and we should decentralize power now.
So these 4 Ds you think can create 100 million jobs going ahead in the next 10 years?
Absolutely, in the next 7 years. I mean, India is very economically complex. We're a 10 horsepower engine running on 2 horsepower. See, Latin American countries are 4 horsepower engines running on 4 horsepower. We are a 10 horsepower engine, so our capacity is much higher than what we do. See, my favorite professor is a guy called Ricardo Hosman. He says development is a game of Scrabble. Right? The government provides the vowels and the private sector provides the consonants. And development is making longer words and more words. See, in the license Raj, we would make 2-letter words, 3-letter words, A and the whatever. Pharma is a 25-letter word. Well, software is a 25-letter word. So I think India's GDP per capita, where we are 128th, is more important than our being 4th in total GDP. And if you remove this regulatory cholesterol and do the 4 Ds of decriminalisation, deregulation, decentralisation and digitization, our per capita income will go up. And finally, that's what citizens care about.
When we stepped into the 21st century, demographic dividend was the go-to word for every economist. Name whoever and they would talk about demographic dividend. Do you think we are still... we haven't exploited our demographic dividend enough, or have we missed that bus?
I mean, the demographic dividend requires balancing the next quarter century, right? Demographic dividends are not about the next quarter. They are about this government school pipeline, which I talked about. They are about redoing your skill system of repair, prepare, and upgrade. So I think the demographic dividend is a reality for India. I mean, 15% of Japan will die in the next 9 years, right? The sale of adult diapers is more than baby diapers in Japan now. I think Europe has a problem. They are 7% of the world's population, but they have 50% of the world's social spending. I think America has a problem. They're 7% of the world's population. They're 50% of the world's defense spending, right? So I think India has a unique opportunity in the next 25 years. We have digested the fixed costs of democracy. Okay. We confuse our poverty as a necessary concomitant of democracy. That's not true. China is not rich today because of communism. It is rich because of leadership. It is rich because they had a more adventurous state. It is because they took more risks. And I think they reduced the gap between their thinkers and doers. See, sometimes in India, we have too many doers who look down on thinkers, saying you don't do anything. We have too many thinkers who look down on doers, saying you don't have the big picture. But Thucydides, he was a Greek historian, he used to say any army that has too much of a gap between its thinkers and doers will have its fighting done by fools and its thinking done by cowards. Right? I think in India, he has latched on to our problem. We have too many thinkers who are not pragmatic enough. And we have too many doers who don't recognize China has raised its ambition to being and proved that they can be a world leader They were 1/3 of licensed drugs last year. They are world leader in EVs. They are world leader in batteries. They are world leader in solar. And I think they're pretty damn close in AI. Why didn't DeepSeek come from India is a question I ask myself. Why did 1/3 of medicines last year in the world come from China, licensed by American companies? So I think India's self-esteem was obviously, Naipaul used to call it a wounded civilization. I wouldn't go that fast. I will prefer to blame our regulatory cholesterol. The way we have treated our entrepreneurs since independence is not fair. More importantly, it's harmful.
Okay, so the main key to produce more jobs, get good wages for those who are employed is entrepreneurship.
Well, without employers, there are no employees. I mean, that's pretty obvious to anybody. So if you don't have enough employers, how are you going to have employees?
But we need a million or millions of entrepreneurs.
We only have
jobs.
30,000 companies in India with a paid-up capital of more than 10 crores. Is this a joke or what? I mean, when nobody will believe that they are in a country, in a $4 trillion economy, in 6.3 crore enterprises, most of them are dwarfs.
How can this be flipped, this 30,000 number that you gave? How can this
deregulate India? Give us Purna Swaraj from the bureaucrats. I mean, you gave Purna Swaraj to India, which was freedom, but you didn't give us independence. The Indian the civil services is neither civil nor services nor Indian in some sense. It is the collector was a British creation to collect land revenue. So I would say, let's not beat ourselves up too much. India is a wonderful place to grow up. It's a wonderful place to live. I went to school, college, everything in India. I think we can easily compete with the best in the world, as we have proven with Pharma, as DBG proved. Your opening balance doesn't decide your destiny. Lupin makes 10% of medicine sold in America, which is one of the highest quality requirements. So to me, pharma and software are not as important for their revenues and foreign exchange and their profits, which matter, but they are for showing us what is possible when we pursue excellence.
Why do you think the Make in India initiative could not take off? We started with a bang in 2014 when Mr. Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India. He started Make in India with a lot of hype, but it doesn't seem to have produced results.
Because we didn't reduce the regulatory cholesterol. The Factories Act of India has 810 ways for a person to go to jail. It is the single act in India. So if there are 810, now they have been removed in this Jan Vishwas bill. So now there are only 4 ways to go to jail for a factory. But there were 810 ways to go to jail. See, what most people don't realize, this regulatory cholesterol doesn't matter for big companies like us. I have 260 guys whose job is handling regulatory cholesterol. They are just a cost center. Small entrepreneurs cannot do that. If some labor inspector comes and threatens to put me in jail, I'll say, go ahead, try. Because I have not broken the law. I have broken your stupid, notification guideline circular which you have created for corruption. But a small entrepreneur, you threaten him to jail, he'll say, okay, I'll pay you, right? It's very inefficient. See, development is moving from deals to rules. In India, if you follow
That's a good sign. I mean,
well, in India, if you follow a rule, you feel like you missed a deal, na? If you follow a rule, say, "Arey, किसी को phone करना था, भाई, किसी को पैसे देना था, rule कौन follow करता है?" That is very inefficient on a national basis. If everybody in India is thinking about how to get a deal, then you're not thinking about how to kick China's butt as entrepreneurs. So I think to me, it's quite clear that our Pakistan, growing up in Kashmir, obviously I thought a lot about Pakistan, but Pakistan's economy is now less than Maharashtra. It will soon be smaller than Tamil Nadu. Mm-hmm. Our real rival, not enemy, our real competitor is China. We need to think about why China. Tsinghua University, I'm one of the co-founders at Ashoka University, and we're proud of what we're doing, and we hope it will be among the top 100 universities in the world. But Tsinghua University, which was destroyed by Mao in 1978, has 84,000 students and 26,000 PhDs. It was 0 in 1978. So I think I can give you tons of examples of the scale of what China has done. So I don't want to live in China, clearly. I don't think it's a great place to live for a citizen. But as an economy, and most importantly, Deng Xiaoping should be is the most valuable human being in the world because he has moved 400 million people out of poverty. I don't know any other human being has moved 400 million people out of poverty. So I think we should learn from China. We don't want to be China. We should learn from America. This current geopolitical churn offers India a chance to reset its relationship with entrepreneurs. That's why I felt Made in India was important, and that's what I believe is India's binding constraint.
India is growing at 7 to 8%, but still many people feel left out. While India may hit the $5 trillion economy tag anytime soon, how do you think, if we don't look at creating more jobs, how serious can that crisis be?
I don't think we're heading for a crisis.
$5 trillion economy and
no,
not enough
if we
jobs.
raise our per capita GDP to China's level, I don't think our target should be total GDP. We should say we are $2,500 per capita income. If we get to 10, 12, 14, 15,000, we will be a middle income country. We will put the poverty of hunger, shelter and food in the museum that it belongs. Finally, I'm not sure richer people are happier people. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So I would say let's focus on per capita GDP more than total GDP. The drivers of per capita GDP are the productivity of our sectors, our cities, our states, our firms, and our individual. So if we focus on productivity, we'll be able to create these jobs, and we'll be able to pay better wages. So I have no doubt in my mind, that when I landed in August 94 in the US, there was a front page article on the Wall Street Journal which said India is more interesting than important. I hope that journalist is eating the newspaper on which he wrote that. I believe what's happening in India is not once in a decade, once in a millennium. It's once in the lifetime of a country. We have not done everything right since independence. We have done a lot right since independence. We should be proud of that. But we should also be honest with ourselves that we screwed up the economy and we should fix it, because we have a lot of young people who want high-paying jobs.
Exactly.
And it is in our power to give it to them if we be honest about our mistakes and fix them.
Talking about the gap between jobs and wages, this April, we had workers coming in the street in Surat, Manesar, Noida. They are protesting that they did not have enough wages, they did not have any social security net. They often work without any contract. Would you have any roadmap, any solution for these workers, of course, without compromising on the interests of the MSMEs and SMEs that employ these people?
India's wages will not go up till we run out of farm labor. There was a Jamaican economist who came to India in the 1950s called Arthur Lewis, who told Indian policymakers, and he got the Nobel Prize later for this, which was the Lewisian transition, that wages only go up when your farm labor runs out. If we have 250 million people on farms, wages cannot go up. You need to have 20 million people on farms, and then wages will go up. China was textbook Arthur Lewis. From 1978 to 1998, wages did not go up. From 1998, minimum wages have gone up every quarter. The best friend of labor is labor shortage. So we need to create a labor shortage in India by creating so many factories that they can't find employees. Otherwise, these sampling errors, this noise, this story, every story is true, but not every story is generalizable. So I would have more outrage for our 200 million farmers than for the 20,000 protesters in Noida. That's my view. Second view of that protest is very specific to a divergence between real wages and nominal wages. See, I had a kid in Gwalior tell me a few years ago, give me 5,000 rupees in Gwalior, 8,000 rupees in Gurgaon, 14,000 rupees in Delhi, and 25,000 rupees in Bombay. I said, why do you need 4 times more money, 5 times more money to go to Bombay? So, जितने बच्चे Bombay 10,000 में गए थे, सब वापस आ गए. खाना, रहना, ऑफिस जाना. Living, eating, commuting नहीं बनता है 10,000 में. I told him, तुम तो थर्ड क्लास फेल है, मैं तुमको 25,000 क्यों दूंगा? He said, अरे सर मैं ग्रेजुएट से खाना कम थोड़ी खाता हूँ, right? So he was not asking for salary. He was asking for reimbursement, right? So bad urbanization in India has created a divergence between real wages, which employees care about, and nominal wages, which employers care about. So I think partly this bad urbanization cannot be blamed on employers. If you don't build metro connectivity, I was in Tokyo recently, my guide came from 70 kilometers away. But it took her 40 minutes to do that, right? So, I mean, that's not my fault that people who can't live in Bombay or have to live in Mira Road and in Pune to work in Cuff Parade. That's not my fault as an employer, right? So I think it's a very complex problem, wages. I think if you take my framing that there are no such thing as poor people, if you fix our states, fix our cities, fix our sectors, fix our firms, and fix our skills, those are the 5 ways to create more high-paying jobs in India. And that is the only way it has been done anywhere in the world. So let's not defy gravity with this stupid, I'll throw 15,000 rupees to every woman in India from a helicopter and suddenly they are going to vote for me. We have seen how welfareism is running out of petrol. And anywhere, government spending has gone up 108 times since 1990. So it was 90,000 crores, it's now 120 lakh crores.
But that's helping people, politicians win.
I don't think
elections.
it's helping anymore. No, it helped the first round and the second round. Now it's running out of petrol because public debt to GDP is already reaching 90%.
Law of diminishing returns is catching up.
No, also there is a cap for states. No, states like Punjab will stop paying salaries in a few months because it has already run out of its RBI overdraft. It has run out of this. See, there is no Diet Coke in development, right? The taste without the calories. I don't think there's a Diet Coke in life, but definitely in economic development, job creation and wages, there is no way to get taste without the calories. We have to do the hard work of reducing the regulatory cholesterol, building ports, building roads, doing civil service reform for the 25 million civil servants who are not ruling this country. They are governing this country. Sometimes they act like they are ruling this country. And that is when entrepreneurs get treated badly. And when entrepreneurs get treated badly, you don't create jobs which pay good wages.
Talking about regulatory cholesterol, and of course you have been a very strong proponent of reforms in the EPFO and ESIC. What would a truly worker-friendly social security system in India look like? What's your vision? If you were to bring in 3 major changes in the EPFO and ESIC, that is employers scheme insurance, one that people would actually want to be part of.
It would be a lifetime university Aadhaar-linked universal social security account. So when anybody in India is born, their Aadhaar account should become the basis of the social security. And we should pay, when somebody joins an employer, you should give me your Aadhaar number and I'll put your provident fund in your Aadhaar number every month. Your Aadhaar number should be the basis for you to get health insurance. See, ESI and EPFO are the world's most expensive defined contribution pension fund and the world's most expensive health insurance fund. In 2016, actually, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley had announced that we will give a choice to employers to pay to NPS or to EPFO. That has not been implemented. ESI, we said we can buy private health insurance. So I think competition would be very important for ESI and EPFO because they don't have clients, they have hostages, they are monopolies. Yeah. We don't have a choice. But now we have lots of alternatives to EPFO. NPS is a credible alternative. We should allow that payment to be done. So I think social security, see, a modern state is a welfare state. I hear some of your criticism to say that why isn't India creating jobs, poor people may be unhappy. I agree, a modern state is a welfare state. All I am telling you is that please don't finance the welfare state with debt, finance it by taxes, right, from entrepreneurs. Okay. If being a good ancestor, Jonas Salks, he was the inventor of the polio vaccine, used to say the only question to ask yourself is, are you being a good ancestor? And I don't think you're being a good ancestor by financing social security payments from debt. You should finance social security payments from companies that grow and pay taxes. So I think ESI and EPFO are a national disaster from a perspective of social security coverage, which was their mandate. I think their costs are too high. And there are alternates to them which can be created, but they won't heal themselves. EPFO has a 52% board, ESI has a 32% board. I don't know any boards which have 52 people on it because you can't even have a board meeting and have a conversation. So I think there's a lot of
room for that.
Yes. So both of them have birth defects, and if you fix those birth defects, that will again not only help employees, it'll help employers, but it'll help India's capital markets. Pension funds are a very important contributor to America's success, and they're deep and broad capital markets which reward innovation. AI has been funded by the US capital markets because they have such a deep pool of long-term capital. In India, our pension funds are non-existent.
Yeah. India took almost 6 years to shrink 29 labor laws into 4 codes to come out with the new labor code last year. Do you think that is genuine reform? It's in a way cutting down on regulatory cholesterol.
It cut down 70%.
How genuine is it? How will it help?
It cut down 70% of the jail provisions in labor laws. It cut down 70% of the forms. So from an administrative perspective, I know people
Is that enough to light a fire among entrepreneurs?
I think it really does help factories be much less at the whim and fancy of the inspectors. I do think it cuts the labor code. In the long run, the labor codes are an important move. Now, no job is ever finished, of course. We should have had 1 labor code instead of 4 labor codes. Okay. We should have had some more cuts. But I mean, to give credit where it is due, the labor codes are a very important move in India's attracting factories and becoming a fertile habitat for job creation.
Does it balance the interests of the employers?
It does. Corporate India has quietly swallowed 40,000 crore hit on gratuity and from the social security codes, right? Because of the definition of basic wages and stuff like that. So I think there was a trade-off, but corporate India has swallowed that, and if it has swallowed that social security hit, I think it deserves to be rewarded by the ESI and EPF for reform.
Okay. Let's talk about the hottest topic right now, that AI is going to eat up all the jobs. It's going to lead to large-scale unemployment. What's your take on AI and the future of jobs in a populous country like India?
I think nobody knows. I think anybody who knows exactly what or believes that they know the future of AI is not being intellectually humble. I think we are very good at modeling which jobs get destroyed. We're very bad at modeling which jobs get created by a new technology. So I think, will AI bring low-skilled people to the median, or will it make superstars uncatchable? It may do a bit of both, but I don't think we know the net calculation yet. So I think in any way in India, see, what is the nightmare of America? For rich countries, AI is probably a bigger nightmare than us because they are at the productivity frontier. We are so far from the... What is the nightmare of America? 45% of their labor force will generate 14% of their GDP. Hamara kya bigaad loge? We are already there, right? 45% of our labor force in farms is only generating... They are not. So when you work with your hands and legs, I think your productivity will improve. When you work with extreme cognition, I think AI will help you. It is the mezzanine layer in between hands and legs and extreme cognitive people where the challenge lies for India. So I think it's too early to say. I still believe that India's software employment will go from 5 million to 10 million. I still believe that India, for now, AI is more of an ally than a threat. Okay. Unfortunately, we're not building our own AI as much as we should have. I keep asking myself, why didn't DeepSeek come from India? But I think we've woken up to that challenge, and hopefully, for that, we will have to completely reform the university system.
Okay. Wouldn't AI kill the entry-level IT jobs? You must be seeing this at TeamLease. What are the figures telling you?
It's creating other kinds of jobs. See,
what's happening on the ground?
Code writing now is not as important as what happens before code, as in design, as in post. So I think that pure code writing productivity, obviously, the machine is doing a better job. But I'm starting to hear pushback against code writing versus code inspection is taking a lot of time. Code validation is taking a lot more time. So many people. So I think I'm not saying that it's not a disaster or that it is something we should ignore or it is something that we should celebrate. I'm just saying it is too early to tell its impact on the labor market. I know a lot of people have models and have started running randomized control trials. But back to mind that every story is true. But is that story replicable, scalable, generalizable, and representative? I'm not sure that all that I'm hearing. So I think AI, like toilet seats and planes and fire, will make our lives much better. Okay. It'll make some people's lives a little difficult in the short run, but I think in the long run, productivity is cumulative. So I'm not a technology pessimist. I'm not, I think we will have an unfair advantage in being human, right? What do humans do well? We have political intelligence, the ability to get along with people we don't like or people who don't like us. We have serendipity intelligence, the ability to improve our own luck by thinking in bets, by thinking in odds. I think we have conversational intelligence. I don't think AI is even close to do that. So I think AI will make soft skills much more valuable than hard skills. That could be one way to think about it. I think AI will make superstars even more productive. And AI will create different kinds of jobs that we didn't. ATMs didn't hurt the banking industry, the mobile phone industry did. Right? ATMs didn't really, they created more jobs. But even now, I think banking employs much more people than people's apocalyptic this thing of that. So I would just be intellectually humble about it's too early to tell.
But aren't there visible signs of AI making IT companies, the top IT companies in India as well as globally, they are cutting down
Did e-commerce reduce
because of AI?
Did e-commerce reduce retail employment in stores? It did. But it created hundreds of jobs in factories, in warehouses, in delivery, in customer service. Of course, it reduced the number of jobs standing in the store. But we never anticipated delivery being such a huge amount of employment. We never anticipated warehouses being such a huge amount of employment. So I think we have to be careful when the story, that's all I said, that our human mind tends to think about which jobs are affected, but we're unable to imagine till much later which jobs will be created. I didn't think customer service, logistics and sales we would be employing almost 1 lakh people when I started TeamLease.
Okay.
That is a child of, I thought we would be employing people in retail stores.
Okay. Right now, what kind of jobs are being threatened by AI and where is the demand coming from? As far as AI is concerned, what kind of skills are required for companies who want to hire people having knowledge of AI?
I mean, I think using AI is very different from making AI, no? So I don't know, right now people are still making AI. Using AI will become like driving a car, no? I mean, you don't need to make a car to drive a car, no? So I say I don't think you should be learning coding in school, no?
But as a staffing and human capital firm, are you seeing a shift happening?
But you can't predict that. See,
No, I'm telling you right now, are you seeing the shift happening right now?
No, I'm not seeing that shift happening yet. I think the shift is people are dancing with ghosts. See, I have studied every report from 1950s, 60s, 70s, trying to predict where jobs will be 50 years from now, 30 years. All of them have the efficacy of palm reading or astrology. So I am unable to predict where jobs will be in 5-10 years. Even in TeamLease's life, the 4 industries which created TeamLease, telecom, retail, financial services, are on strike. But so many other industries are hiring, so many other functions are hiring. I'm not the chef, I'm the waiter. I don't create the jobs, I just serve the jobs. I'm not the chef. So I think it is a mug's game. So, but just because we can't predict the future doesn't mean we can't prepare for the future. So as an individual, I think, my parents had 35-year careers, I'll have 45-year careers, my kids will have 55-year careers. So for a 55-year career, is the 10 plus 2 plus 3 system going to work? I don't think so. And then how will you have lifelong learning? I have read a book a week for 42 years. That's my way of lifelong learning. I know people who listen to a podcast every day. Hopefully they'll listen to yours and ours. But if you don't have a personal lifelong learning program, AI will threaten you. But if you are a human being who is curious and recognizes that curiosity improves your judgment, who will recognize that building relationships is a really hard skill. So I would say let's not focus on the threats of AI. As human beings, let's go back to the basics of what human beings do well. And if you go back to doing that, you're no longer going to be destroyed by it.
5 industries or sectors where you think large-scale jobs will be created and destroyed in the next 5 to 10 years?
No idea, absolutely.
You don't
and I think I think anybody who tells you that is not being intellectually humble about how complex, adaptive. We have the physics thought world has to shift to the biology thought world of how we think about economies. Physics thinks about discrete systems, while biology knows that everything is interrelated. So I think the complex adaptive system, in fact, randomized control trials which took over economics, I think have not done economics. One of my biggest, at least I'm very sad that economics has become mathematics and political science has become statistics. Because the best part of economics was thinking about justice. The best part of political science was thinking about I mean, how would you explain the Bengal election or the Tamil Nadu election is not through statistics. People don't vote on algorithms, they vote through heuristic. Right?
Do you think more jobs will be created in West Bengal now that we have a BJP government?
Yeah, BJP, I mean, Bengal is an economic wasteland. The only way is up. So I think anybody else who comes into power in West Bengal would be able to turn it around, because it's an economic wasteland. It is India's biggest tuition industry, because every child has to evacuate as soon as they graduate. Mm-hmm. You cannot stay in West Bengal. And such smart people from West Bengal, Bihar have to leave. In fact,
what's the potential of West Bengal?
Why would you want people to leave? I mean, I just met the Chief Minister of Punjab. He said, wherever you go in the world, you meet a Punjabi. I said, sir, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. Why don't you keep them in Punjab? Why are you sending them all over the world? But there are no jobs in Punjab, So I think it's important to recognize that chief ministers, 29 chief ministers matter more than one prime minister, and they are the unit for job creation.
Yeah. Two more questions. TeamLease recently came out with employment outlook report for H1 FY27. Could you tell us what is the employment outlook?
I mean, it was very mixed. Like? I think that the war is probably a bigger impact. I think obviously people will say that AI is starting to hold people back. I don't see that. I think the war has had supply chain disruptions. Mm-hmm. I think the confidence is being impacted. I think the rupee being challenged, cost of money. There are many variables. So I would say that rather than look at that outlook, let's wait for this outlook where we have digested that shock of the war and AI. But as of now, our growth outlook is among the brightest in the world.
We shouldn't ring an alarm bell yet.
No, historian Brodel used to warn against fireflies and froth. We don't pay attention to fireflies and froth. Take the long view. And I think for an economy, that is really important.
Final question, Manish. If you had to give one piece of advice to a 22-year-old who is stepping out into his first job, what would that single piece of advice be?
The first three words in the book are Veer Bhogya Vasundhara. The brave shall inherit the earth. And I think we all think about curiosity, intelligence, kindness, and other things, which are obviously more important than the accounting, marketing, and finance crap I learned in my MBA. But we underrate bravery. And bravery is probably the most important virtue, because you can't fake bravery. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people who fake kindness, who fake curiosity, who fake other virtues, but you can't fake bravery. So I would just say take more risk when you're young. Go join a small company which gives you a big job rather than a big company which gives you a small job. Join a growth company rather than a big company. Think about, as Dumbledore tells Harry Potter in Chamber of Secrets, it is our choices more than our abilities that reveal what we are. So make brave choices where don't be scared of, or don't follow the warmth at the center of the herd, which we often do in India when we're young. I think DBG didn't do it. I went to Wharton, I took the next flight and came back. And I think the few choices in life which are scary when you make them are actually the ones which are most rewarding in the last one. And, the first three words of the book are brave and inherit the earth. The last three words are people make history. History doesn't make people, right?
Yeah. What are those most courageous and most riskiest things that you did when you were 22?
I would say just taking a loan for going to Wharton and coming straight back and starting a company, right? When I went to Wharton, I had the option to go to Wall Street and take a few jobs there. I would say that in retrospect, because I was passionate about being an entrepreneur, was just taking the flight, because if I had stayed back in the US, I'm not sure I would be doing all the exciting things that I would be doing, and I would have a president who would be asking me based on the color of my skin whether I belong to that country or not. So there could be many other things, but I think just taking a loan for Wharton, coming back, starting a company when I knew that I couldn't pay back that loan for some time was, I think, an important decision for me. I think that mattered more to me.
Was it the most courageous of your life?
I don't know, yaar. It's hard to say. I can say for DBG, there were many courageous things. I will only know in retrospect. No? Postmortems have a certainty that prescriptions don't. So prescriptions are harder. Postmortems are easier.
Manish Sabharwal, thank you so much for joining us on the Rediff podcast. We appreciate talking to you, and we would want you to come here on the Rediff podcast again.
Great to catch up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.